And if you black people will stop shooting one another, maybe you'll get somewhere in life.
Now, the problem with comments like this is that it assumes that the entirety of gun violence that takes place in cities like Chicago comes from black Americans. But as you'll see, that's not really true. Let's take a look. Hi, I'm Dwayne, and welcome to another edition of Samba News. I'm so glad that you're here. If you haven't done so already, be sure to click the like button. And also, if you've been around for a minute and you haven't subscribed, this is the best time to do it. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and come on, let's go and get into this. Hey, before I continue, I want to make sure you're aware that our store, sambatree.com, we have a 18% off store-wide sale going on right now. This is a store my wife and we started, and it's the purpose of it is really to address the health and wellness issues of people, period, and so we use it as a point of education, but we also have a lot of things there that we do sell that right now, if you check it out, this is the best time to check it out. 18% off store wide. And that includes bulk items, everything from herbs to powders to juices, to all kinds of great stuff. So go and check it out because this sale is about to end, y'all. 18% off store-wide, including bulk items. Check it out at sambatree.com. We hear this assumption when you hear people say, oh, Chicago, they had another 30 people or 50 people that got shot. What's the first thing? Let's be honest. What's the first thing? What's the profile that comes in your mind when you first hear that? Do you think of a redheaded young man with, white skin and blue eyes? And is that what comes in your mind? Or is it someone that's from China or from Japan or whatever? Does that come in mind? Or is it someone that kind of has skin that looks like mine? Is that what comes in your mind? Well, that's what we're going to address here because it's very important for us to get into the details. Who are the people who are actually spreading a lot of the violence that we see happening or hear about happening in places like Chicago? And what better place to start is looking at the gangs, and so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to look at some of the top gangs, street gangs in Chicago. Now, let's be very clear here from the start. Are black Americans, is there a certain percentage of black Americans who do participate in some of these street gangs and street violence? Absolutely. But what we're looking at today is the percentages. Are we making up the majority of all of this that's happening? Let's take a look. Now, the first gang we're going to look at, the name gives it away. It's the Latin Kings. The Latin Kings is one of the larger gangs in Chicago, and is primarily made up of both Mexicans and people from Puerto Rico. All right, so the next one we're going to look at is they're called the Gangster Disciples. Now, the Gangster Disciples, they are a combination or a mixture of black immigrants. In other words, these are people who are classified as blacks, but they come from maybe, it could be Africa, it could be Haiti or whatever. And you also have black Americans that are involved in this gang as well. And they're known to be one of Chicago's most notorious gangs. The Maniac Latin Disciples. Now, again, the name gives it away because it's comprised of mainly Mexicans and also people from Puerto Rico. And there you go. So, again, another gang with Latin roots. Now, the Almighty Saints, they actually started as a Polish gang, but over the years, it has become a largely Hispanic gang made up primarily of people of Mexican descent. Here's another one, the Spanish Cobras. Once again, this is a gang that is primarily made up of people from Puerto Rico. Ambrose. This is another gang. It started off as an Italian gang, but later on, it's become a majority Hispanic gang made up primarily of Mexican individuals. La Raza. Now, I'm sure many of you have heard of La Raza. Again, I believe the name actually means, La Raza means the race. And this is a gang that is primarily, once again, made up of individuals that are Mexican. The Simon City Royals. This is a gang that started off as a white gang, but it's evolved into a gang that it's made up of people of various backgrounds including people who are Hispanic. Another gang is called the Insane Deuces. This is yet another gang that is primarily made up of Mexicans. The Tiny Rascals gang. This is a gang that is comprised mostly of people from Southeast Asia, particularly from Cambodia. And then finally, we have the Asian Boys. The name again gives it away. This is another gang that is comprised of individuals that come out of Southeast Asia, mainly from Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. So as you can see, most of these gangs are comprised of people who are not necessarily Black Americans. However, but when you look through the statistics, many of them are classified as such. I mean, especially if they're coming from places like Puerto Rico or, Haiti. There's been a large influx of Nigerians coming into Chicago as well. I'm not saying that Nigerians are all of these are part of gangs or anything like that, but all of these individuals would be considered Black people. When you look at the statistics, many of them, the federal and state and even local governments would classify a lot of these people as Black. And so when people hear these reports and they see some of the stats, or rather they see some of the victims, which in many cases, these victims are Black Americans, the assumption is that many of these gangs are comprised of Black folks. Now, what we're looking at is a map from Chicago Sun-Times, and they keep a track of all of these different murders that take place on a daily basis in Chicago. I mean, you can see it like Chicago has the measles almost. But if you take a look at the names here, this is just in Cook County. And you'll see a combination of, Spanish last names, but you'll also see Black Americans as well on here. I'm going pretty slow here so that you can kind of pause and look at it, but you can also go on their website and you can see for yourself, and then they give you links here where you can click on and read the backstory, and if you do that, you're going to find a lot of these people who are getting murdered. They're just innocent bystanders. These are people who were just standing there, or maybe they were on their way to school or something like that. So you have a high percentage of that. Now, another thing that you're going to notice as well is that there's a lot of indicators here that says unknown. When you see unknown there, that is a clear indicator that a lot of these people who are catching bullets are people who are more than likely undocumented. In other words, these are people who came into this country illegally. And so that's another factor that's not really counted in any of the stats, for whatever their reasons are. But the truth of the matter is a lot of these people who are victims are people who are in this country illegally. And that's why they can't find any paperwork on them. So when we have politicians that claim to champion the causes of Black Americans, but at the same time, they're out here pushing agendas where they're throwing open the gates for illegal immigration.
We don't need to build a wall. This is a crisis of his own making. And by definition, just plain speak, basic English language definition, it is not an emergency.
And then they're pushing them in Black communities. As Black Americans, this is what we're facing as well. So a lot of times, again, when people want to assume that we're the primary ones that's pushing all this violence or whatever, we're catching it as well. And this is why you're seeing many Black Americans that are leaving, cities like Chicago, and they're going to other places, safer areas, because they want to be safe. So this whole issue of illegal immigration is something that Black Americans should be very important to us, because in places like Chicago, you got a lot of Black Americans that have been sounding the alarm on this for a very long time.
$70 million. Y'all won't even put $1 million in one neighborhood.
Especially when you're a 43-year-old resident of the city of Chicago versus being somebody who just got here, who being treated just like you should be treated.
In the 37th ward, there was a family, the Jones family. Amari Jones was standing in her family building that they've owned for 40 years doing a TikTok dance with her mother. A bullet came through the window, hit her in the neck. She fell to the ground in front of her mother and bled to death. A month ago, on the Chicago mugshot page, her mother was on that page. Her mother had on her daughter's Rest in Peace t-shirt. She washed it so many times that it was completely faded out. She was completely high, out of her mind, and the charge was possession. Now, the first $51 million that this council gave to the migrants came from the opioid settlement funds. I am here on behalf of the Jones family, on behalf of the 37th Ward, on behalf of Black Chicago, on behalf of the entire city, to ask you all to vote no and put that money back in the opioid settlement fund. We need that money in my neighborhood. We need that on my block. That woman should not be at Cook County Jail because she's grieving over a random act of violence that caused her to lose her child in front of her face, when the city of Chicago has millions upon millions upon millions of dollars to give to people who ain't paid a dime into the tax base. We've been in my building for 52 years. We're about to pay some more taxes. The Jones family has been in their building for 45 years, paying taxes every year on time. So I'm asking y'all to use our tax money for our people. We need it. We got people leaning. We got people rocking. We got overdosing. We got pass out lines. You live on the west side, Mayor Johnson. You know exactly what I'm talking about. We need the money for us. We need opioid treatment on the west side of Chicago. We are the headquarters of the cartel, and everybody in here knows it. They selling more drugs than the law can allow, and y'all giving money back to them because they traffic those people up here, so we paying them going and coming. Absolutely not. We pay too much. It costs too much money to live in this city. Help Wanda Jones. Help every other grieving mother who feels like she has to go get high to get over the loss of her child. This is a woman who lived in that house. She still sleeps in that living room where her daughter passed out and bled to death.
And by definition, just plain speak, basic English language definition, it is not an emergency.
Now, this is not to say that all people who enter into this country illegally are violent and they're gang members or anything like that. But it's when you're bringing in people who are undocumented, there's no background check. So you don't know. Versus here, if you're born in this country, you know, there are certain background checks that people who are born here have to go through. So it's a lot easier to catch these people. But when you're just open the gates and then handing people thousands and thousands of dollars and just saying, hey, listen, go and just enjoy life, and here's some free food, here's some education, here's some housing and all of that. And the whole time you don't know where these people are coming from or if they have any criminal record from where they came from. You're basically opening up all types of unfortunate potentials, and where people of all races, for that matter, are subjected to it. And this is why we have to, you know, this issue of illegal immigration should be of utmost importance. And I say that not just, you know, talking to Democrats, but also Republicans too, you know. So this is an issue that, you know, as a people, we really do have to take very seriously, because as you can see, we're all being impacted by it. So what are your thoughts on this? I would love to hear what you have to say on this, because this is a very important topic. I mean, really, really important. And there are many of you, or I would say at least some of you, who have been directly or indirectly touched by this whole topic of illegal immigration. You may not be a person that lives in somewhere like Chicago or some other place where your housing is being compromised or where you live is being compromised due to violence. But what about where you work? What about your job? You know, have you been adversely affected by illegal immigration in the type of work that you've been doing? I want to hear those stories. Put it in the comment section and let us know, because in the future, I would like to do a video where we actually read your comments and we can talk about this topic even further. We cannot depend on either party to really make this an issue. It's on us to do it. And again, I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and let's stand on truth. No matter what, we got to speak truth to power, and it starts now. Thank you so much. You guys take care. I'll see you again soon.